You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.
Now, throughout the history of the Americas, when we isolate the religious dimension of humanity, we constantly read of the colonial period, the modern period, and the postmodern obsession with the primitive and the other. The traditional religions of the Americas are always characterized by Western male traditional conceptions of divine transcendence. And this confuses the Hispanic, this confuses the Latino, this confuses the Mexican, this confuses the Chicano. Native religious beliefs are identified by non-native peoples and those who consider their religions as mythological as being animistic. Oh, being with the animals, as being pantheistic or polytheistic, having many gods. So to be primitive is to be savage. To be primitive is to be pre-Columbian, to be tribal, to be third world, to be underdeveloped, to be developing, to be archaic, to be traditional. My favorite is, of course, Native peoples, they're exotic. They're the anthropological record. They're non-Western. They're other. But it is precisely the religious dimension, indigenous religious practices, these so-called primitive traits that have sustained Native identities to the present. See, Native religious thought throughout the Western Hemisphere have commonalities. Now, first and foremost, Native religious thought envisions a world of connection. Native religious thought envisions a world where pluralism and diversity are celebrated. So there's this world of connection, there's this world of relationship, and pluralism, diversity are celebrated. Because when we take a look at Native religions, the male and the female occupy equal status. And women's perspective is included in the naming of God. Women's perspective is included in the naming of human beings. Women's perspective is included in the naming of the world. And this is key to understanding because on the other side of the world, all religions are male-centered. Only in Africa do you find female-centered religions. And that's why Africans, when they come to the Western Hemisphere, are definitely going to connect with Native peoples. Woman-centered societies. Despite the variety of ecological and social conditions that influence gender roles, common symbols of gender are expressed in all traditional indigenous religious beliefs and practices, and they reflect positive cultural attitudes towards human males and towards human females. And this is the controversy that's sweeping through archaeology today, is again, gender, the importance of gender. The cosmologies of all Native American peoples, male and female beings are endowed with powers, and they have specific roles in the natural world, they have specific roles in the supernatural world. And one of the most important is female fertility. Female fertility is an important component of all these belief systems. So when you take a look at Native societies, Native societies have female puberty ceremonies because they don't look at menstruation as a taboo as our society does. Menstruation is more accurately viewed as a symbol celebrating the importance of the female reproductive role. And that's so key. It's not about a sign of women's defilement. This is a practice in Mexicana culture known as Marianismo. Understand that in our society, we have no respect for women's reproductive role. Our society just objectifies women. It's very misogynist. Right? Take a look at the Hollywood culture and what you need to do to advance in the Hollywood culture. It's all being revealed right now as a result of women's movement and the Me Too movement. Again, it's just whatever it is that the male wants. And of course, the male prefers just to have immediate gratification rather than trying to understand something about the reproductive role. So menstruation, this is a very powerful experience, woman. A woman's spirit. You have a connection to the earth because your woman's spirit is connected to that moon, to the cycles of the earth. The earth cleanses itself. Woman cleanses herself. And so this is what's the importance of female fertility. So when you take a look at native religions, I'm going to argue that it is inclusive, it is a pluralistic monotheism, where God or goddess, because God is non-gendered, goddess is intimately present in every creature, plant, animal, and human, where everything remains sustained in creation. Only when these traditional religious structures were destroyed, either by the development of male hierarchically based state societies, such as the Mexica or the Inca empires, or Cahokia, or empires that are based on warfare, or by post-colonial historical forces, the deterioration of women's position in indigenous societies began. But nonetheless, Western male theologians and scholars view and continue to view native religions as radically different from and inferior to biblical monotheism. So when we take a look at Western history, if one is not Jewish, if one is not Christian, and if one is not Islamic, then one is a Gentile, one is a pagan, one is a non-believer, one with many gods. Why don't you have this God? We have one God. His name is Yahweh. Or we have one God. His name is Jesus Christ. Or we have one God. His name is Allah. And yet, they're all from the word of Abraham, and Yahweh, Jesus Christ, and Allah, they can't even get it together. They seem to hate each other, and yet they come from the same religion. But nonetheless, they've gone throughout the world and convinced everybody that that's their God. Everyone was dumped into one big basket unless you experienced a conversion. So this narrow view leads to errors in interpreting native culture. This narrow view leads to errors in interpreting language. And it provides a religious rationale for native removal and genocide. Native peoples are backward and consequently hold back development. So this reclusive transcendent God of Western theology, and this is a theology that's formulated from the perspective of male rather than universal experience. This theology has no respect for a religion that's based on a plurality of images, has no respect for a religion that's based on a plurality of metaphors for the sacred. When you take a look at the patriarchal character of Western religion, take a look at what's happening in Israel. Take a look at the fanaticism between Christians and Muslims. It regards veneration of ancestors of anybody else, especially with regards to native peoples, as pagan superstition. And the historical record underscores the sexism of traditional Western religions influences racist, imperialist, ethnocentric, and heterosexist forms of oppression. So when you take a look at the patriarchal character of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, it refuses to respect the interconnectedness of life on the planet. That's why there's so much climate change denial. It refuses to respect life as cyclical and changing. So let's understand something about the native tradition. Right? Let's recognize that native peoples understand Creator as being represented in many forms, physical and spiritual, male and female. For instance, let's take a look at the sky or the sun. They're known as grandfather. How would you like a personal relationship with the earth where you can speak to them as part of your ancestral heritage? So when you take a look at the sky, and you understand out in the sky, there are different names to the planets in different traditional languages. Right now, we know the planets because of the Roman tradition, but those are gods. Those planets are named after Roman gods. So understand, there's a grandfather that tells stories. The sky tells stories. There's the sun. How would you like to have a religion where you have a personal participation with the sun? Because that sun we can't live without. That sun provides us the energy to survive. So how about understanding something about your grandparents, your grandfather? And then there's the moon. Having a personal relationship with that moon. And that moon comes through many different cycles. It visits us constantly. It's in its cyclical experience with us. In the cleansing, the seasons, we understand a lunar calendar. We live the solstices, we live the equinoxes, we live the cleansing, we live the woman's cycle. Woman, we all come from woman's spirit. I know I came from my mother, the woman's spirit. I am the spirit of my mother. We as men, we don't have that power. Women have that power. I have 2 daughters. I could never do what my wife does. I can never do what my woman does with my daughters. I have no capacity by which to be a mother. Mothers are so important in life. And our grandmother, the moon, shares with us that. So how about a personal participation in the world with grandmother? Then, of course, there's the greatest mother of all, and that's Mother Earth. Let's understand something about Mother Earth. We all recognize that. In fact, that seems to be a major concept with regards to understanding and appreciating life of the earth with the fire and the water and the air. Human beings, when they were created, possessed the knowledge to use these 4 elements. Then there's one of the most significant is water. Water is so significant. Water is our mother. Without water, we can't survive. Cool, clear water. Water is the key to life. Here we have a Pueblo image of Mother Water. Water, we are the children of water. When the water breaks, the child comes. Mother Water. So understand, with regards to native traditions, it's rooted in an environmental appreciation. Native peoples appreciate the environment. They practice a nature ethics so that they recognize that life is cyclical and we must always give back and give in return because we live with the plants, we live with the animals. Now, there's different kinds of creation stories that you're going to be involved in this unit. And one of my favorites is, of course, when we go to North America, there's the Haudenosaunee. And the Haudenosaunee are the people of the Longhouse. They're known as the Iroquois. And the Haudenosaunee have a story of their creation of woman who fell from the sky. Let me just share with you something about the creation. In the beginning, in the sky world, a pregnant wife asked her husband to fetch the delicacy she craved, but she wanted the bark of a root of the great tree in the middle of the sky world, which none were permitted to touch. And finally, however, he gave in and scraped away soil to bear the root of the tree. Underneath was a hole, and as the woman peered down into it, she fell through. The birds helped transport her as she fell, and the great sea turtle received her on his back. Here on the sea turtle's back, she planted bits of the roots and plants that she brought from the sky world. And she walked across the turtle's back, planting, praying, creating the earth that we know as Turtle Island. So that's the Haudenosaunee. The Haudenosaunee have a fantastic story about their experience with the earth. They call them, they understand that they live on the turtle's back. We live on Turtle Continent. That's the Haudenosaunee up in North America. Now let's go to Central America. Let's go to a place that is most common that everybody understands, and that is where the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans switch positions. So let's go now to understanding the center of the earth. Let's go to the Central America, and let's appreciate a certain group of people. When we understand Central America, we can come to a place that's today now called Panama. And when we go to Panama, let's focus in on the next slide and understand and appreciate a place where the world turns. And this is the place where the world turns, where the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans change positions. Now, if you notice up on the right-hand side of that isthmus, the Panamanian Isthmus, on the right-hand side, there's a group of native peoples, and they're known as the Kuna. And the Kuna people understand themselves to be the caretakers of the world, the caretakers of the place where the world turns. That's what their unique experience is. That's what Kuna means. And the Kuna people are a very proud people. Right now, they're involved in a resistance movement because developers here from the United States, especially here from Palm Springs and Los Angeles, they want to go and create a resort so that everybody can go out there and have fun along the beach, and they want to eliminate these populations because they're holding back development. Well, these native peoples don't want their areas developed. They want to continue their traditions as Kuna people, and they're involved in a resistance movement from those who wish to, the extractive industries, wish to extract the resources from their lands. That's the Kuna people. Now, most of you perhaps understand plants and recognize that you have plants in your house. And many of you having plants in your house, some of you perhaps really like your plants, that you talk to your plants. And so you can imagine when you talk to your plants, the reason why you talk to your plants is that your plants, you appreciate them, but there's, when you talk to your plants, and those of you who do talk to your plants, it's very important to talk to your plants, because you are providing your plants with your bad breath, which is, of course, carbon dioxide. And what plants give out is oxygen. So recognize that there is a relationship that you have to the plants. So in the plants, when you're talking to them, actually you're making love with them. It's a biological, it's a chemistry experience. And so plants will dance for you when you have to take a look at them very carefully when you're talking to them, because they will dance. And the best time to really talk to plants is right when the sun comes up, and if you talk to them right with the sun, they juxtapose, they're right in front of you before the sun, you'll actually be able to see your plants grow. You'll be able to see your plants dance. There is a reaction. Now, you can imagine, let's magnify this 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, 1,000,000,000 times, and we're going to come to an understanding and appreciation for a certain place known as South America and the Amazonian Basin. So let's take a look at South America, and let's take a look at the unique configuration of South America, because the configuration of South America, it looks like a heart. It looks like a human heart. And there's the aorta. And when we take a look at the aorta, let's focus in more on the aorta, and let's understand certain things about this aorta, and we come to the Amazonian Basin. So let's focus in on the next picture and take a look at the root of our air patterns, our weather patterns, is in a place known as the Sacred Heart of the Earth. You can recognize that 3/4 of our weather patterns are part of that experience. And the native peoples who live there, there's different groups of native peoples that are involved right now in resistance movements, because Brazil is actively involved in felling the rainforest of the Amazonian region. So if you take a look at that, that's the Sacred Heart of the Earth. It pumps the weather patterns that we here in North America rely on. So understand, by felling the rainforest, we are destroying Earth's sacred heart. And this is what the Yanomami have shared with the world. The Yanomami are about taking care of this Earth's sacred heart. They are the caretakers of this place. Now, this region is so important for us because we're all interconnected. South America is interconnected to North America. We get our weather patterns from there. So when we go and destroy creation, when we go and destroy and we fell the rainforests for what? What are the rainforests being felled for? Cattle production. Why cattle production? Because hamburger is what feeds the world. And hamburger, take a look at hamburger. It's on every corner along with alcohol in this market. Every corner of this market, you find hamburger and alcohol. It seemed like they go together, right? And so when we understand something about climate change, we got to recognize what's happening with regards to cattle production, animal products. That's just to share with you. Now, let me share with you something more special with regards to Native traditions. Native traditions have three sisters that have been feeding us since time immemorial. And my anthropological sisters call them the three sisters, and that is corn, beans, and squash. And corn, beans, and squash have been feeding us traditionally throughout the Western Hemisphere since time immemorial. Corn, beans, and squash is significant because they form the basis of a well-established diet for Native societies. And the first kernels of corn have now been dated back to 7,000 years BCE. So for the longest time, Native peoples have been involved with feeding off of native corn. I don't know if we can get the three sisters up. My crew is, I guess, having problems with regards to putting up. There we go. The three sisters. I'm trying to get my notes here. Yes, the three sisters are next. Taking a look at, again, corn, beans, and squash. What's unique with regards to this is that most of you who are Chicano recognize that your abuelas, your abuelitas have always been making food based on these three sisters, corn, beans, and squash. And what's so important is that these seeds have always been around the Native American diet from time immemorial, and so in the Mexican culture, in the Chicano culture, corn, beans, and squash form the basis for our identity and our experiences. And so I shared with my anthropological sisters that you know there's always another sister that's the wild one of the bunch, and the wild sister is the one that's really gives us the basis by which to increase the tastes of these three sisters, and that's chile. The chile, and you think about the chile because the chile is not a domesticated plant. The chile grows wild in abundance throughout the Western Hemisphere. So when we take a look at the next, the wild sister, let's appreciate the wild sister, because the wild sister chile, if you're Mexicano, if you're a Chicano, you recognize that the wild sister is the key to our appreciation of ourselves. Crew, you can't get that slide up there, the wild sister. Chile, Chile's next. Yes, the wild sister. What will we do without the wild sister? Now, one of the things about Native peoples and what Native peoples have always been given in terms of their environmental religion is that they were given a plant, and this is common throughout the Western Hemisphere. And this plant is going to be disrespected when Europeans come to the Western Hemisphere, and this because they're going to have some kind of physiological response to it, and they're going to get high. But this is tobacco, and tobacco is significant in Native societies from North, Central, and South America. Tobacco was given to Native peoples as a means by which to offer up their prayers to creation. So whenever you see Native peoples, when they gather together, they're always offering up tobacco. And we've become to know the pipe, and the pipe is so important because we've understood the pipe, and U.S. history has always emphasized this particular peace pipe. This has been part of the mythology or the prejudices that Native peoples, that whites have always had towards Native peoples, that Europeans have always had towards Native peoples, is that somehow they have this pipe, and like, man, it's a peace pipe, you know, whatever. But this pipe is birch bark, and it's from the plains. The plains Native peoples are the ones that use this particular kind of pipe to understand their ceremonies, to recognize the times that they come together to pray for the environment, for their relationship to the earth, for the creatures and the crawlers. But everybody has their own ways of praying with tobacco. Perhaps most of you are familiar with this one cartoon character. It's from the 1950s and 60s. His name was Popeye, and he always had this little corn cob pipe. Well, that pipe is familiar with those native peoples from the southeastern states, especially the Cherokee. Cherokee always had these corncob pipes. These pipes here are familiar with those from the plains, like the Sioux, the Comanche, the Kiowa Apache, the ones that lived along the plains following the buffalo. And then in Mexico and in the Southwest, they rolled little tobacco offerings from corn husks. So they had little corn husks as a means by which to smoke. And the idea was, with regards to smoking, is that you offered up your prayers to creation. And that's what the significance of the tobacco is all about. So this ends the first segment with regards to native religions and native traditions, our red roots. I just wanted to emphasize that there is a different way of understanding creation. There is a different way to understanding connection. And native peoples have a connection to the earth that is important, that appreciates the environment. And we're going to end this segment with a film clip on an Anishinaabe pipe prayer ceremony. Okay?
First of all, we want to talk to the Creator. Just pray in your language.
Okay, I wanted to end this segment in a prayerful manner, simply because when you talk about creation, that means you're talking about people's religion. And you need to respect, there needs to be some kind of respect. And these are the Anishinaabe pipe ceremony, and they filmed it, but this elder decided to film it because he's sending us a message. That's the only reason why I would show it, show such a ceremony. And those pipe ceremonies are very important because they make a connection, and this is what the whole idea behind the Native American connection, as the first film clip shared with you about Nora Naranjo Morse and her traditions. And this particular film clip shares with you, again, the significance